Hi, people. Firstly, thank you to those who came by to my live stream yesterday. I think it went well. It was a good live stream, about an hour. If you miss any of my live streams, not to worry. I'll be doing them periodically. I'm not putting any specific times on them simply because people are in different time zones, and I myself don't really know what I'll be doing at a particular time. So if I sort of set it aside, it's not that convenient for me. I think that spontaneous approach is best. And like I say, if you miss one, no problem. You'll catch another one. Um, I'm going to add a little bit to what I said in my last video about just stop oil. And I hope this doesn't sound repetitive, but it was brought up yesterday in the live stream, and it's just an ongoing thing. I came across a Daily Mail article on how the French deal with this, and no surprise, they take a much more robust approach. I mean, their police use tear gas, use batons, they don't mess around. Um, and you have to ask, what's going on? Why is it our police are so soft when it comes to eco-zealots? In other areas, like I say, during the pandemic, they were certainly not lacking any action there when it came to people violating the COVID regulations. And, they were upholding the law. I'm not criticizing them for it, but there is an obvious lack of consistency. But I want to get into the heart of what these so-called protests. I really am reluctant to call them protests. I think it's activism. I think it's direct action tactics. I think it's criminality, a lot of it. But I'm really reluctant to call it protest because I think protest gives this veneer of um, reasonableness, or, well, they just feel strongly about this issue and they're protesting. I felt for a long time that's a mistake, and I would like to see the press, not refer to it so much. I talked to colleague Grenade. You made this point that the media has a responsibility to play. That's what I read into your comment, that every time they call them peaceful protesters or even talk in terms of these protesters, it legitimizes them effectively. But a lot of the narrative really has to be challenged. So, for example, they say we're just ordinary people who are taking desperate measures. I put it to them, not that they would ever listen because they're not very good at that, but ordinary people don't do this. Ordinary people do not put themselves in a situation where they are knowingly hurting the public, where they're getting arrested for it. The police have improved a little bit, although I still think the whole strategy is wrong. But they're getting arrested, so they're notching up a criminal record. They don't care. They think that they're heroes. They have a tunnel vision, so they're not listening to public feedback. They just don't care. That is not normal people. Normal people don't function like that. I think the reality is they're hardcore activists. I mean, let's face it, in terms of the actual activism, in terms of people on the ground, wearing those orange jackets, I reckon at most a couple of hundred. Let's say top maybe 500 of them nationwide. So we're talking a very small fringe minority of people here. Now, on their social media, they may get wider support. There will be apologists who will defend them, but not necessarily engage in their tactics, maybe because they don't want to get a criminal record. Then there are other apologists in the public domain. People like James O'Brien of LBC is on record defending them. There's a few others. And I say this because if they escalate, God forbid they really engage in some sort of terroristic sabotage, then I think, their celebrity backers will need to be explaining themselves, and they'll, you know, have to justify why they basically condoned what at that point would be outright terrorism. And I don't think they're very far off it. I absolutely don't trust them. I think that there's a very real chance that they could go down that path because, after all, they've been doing this for 4 years. Nothing has changed in terms of policy, except the public order bill has been introduced. They may take it on themselves and say, well, this pissing off the public isn't working. Let's try something even more drastic. Let's bomb railway lines. Let's bomb oil depots. Um, God knows what they might try. I think they're potentially dangerous. And what's interesting about them is, on the surface, they do seem quite normal. They're from a range of professions. They're mostly kind of middle class, middle England types. On the surface, they don't look threatening. They don't look dangerous. A lot of them look like overgrown hippies. But beneath that veneer, I think actually there is something cult-like going on. I'd honestly compare them to the likes of the Oath Keepers in the United States or any other cult-like movement, because I think one of the signs to me of cult-like behavior is an utter and complete inability to introspect, and also their dystopian narratives that billions of people are going to die in a few years. That's nonsense. It's scaremongering nonsense. When they're telling young people that we're all going to die, I think it's very immoral what they're doing there. I think they're messing with people's mental health. Um, Now, I don't come at this from a point of view of, some of their critics would say that the whole climate thing is all made up and it's just some left-wing invention and there's nothing in it. I don't agree with that. I think the planet is heating up. I think that that's the scientific consensus, and I think that you'd be pretty you'd be pretty ignorant to say that with 8 billion people in the world growing, there isn't a human impact on the planet. There clearly is. And I feel very strongly that ecosystems like the Amazon have to be protected. And please, Bolsonaro was defeated in Brazil. I think he was disastrous. Um, okay, it's in Brazilian sovereign territory. It also goes into other countries, by the way. But I think something like that is unique. And it's not necessarily that more people are dying in natural disasters. I mean, if you look at the 1970s and look at some of the storms of that era, for example, 1970 in Bangladesh, then it was East Pakistan, 500,000 people died in the Bola cyclone. Um, we compare that to this year, the cyclone Mocha in the same region killed about 500 people. It's not that more people are dying, but it's that these things are happening more frequently. And I remember last summer it was scorching. I mean, it was like, this is Sunderland and it was over 30 degrees. That isn't normal. Um, but I think it would be pretty ignorant to say that there is not something going on here. I think it would be pretty ignorant to say that it's all exaggerated by the Green Lobby. I don't think that's the case. But I do think that the Green Lobby is guilty of extreme hyperbole. I mean, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change doesn't align with the sort of doomsday prophecies they're coming out with. That, for example, billions of people will die. Um, that Daily Mail report showed that Chris Packham, the naturalist, has now joined their ranks. I'm not overly surprised by that, from what I know of the guy. If he's a BBC employee, he should absolutely lose his job, because if that doesn't violate partiality, I don't know what does. Absolutely lose any. I don't know if he's still presenting or not on the BBC. I'm not sure that he is, but if he is, that is a clear-cut case where, yeah, there's no way he should keep his job whilst engaging in potentially criminal behaviour. Um, and in the photograph of him, it showed these two activists beside him. One had nurse written over her top, and the other paramedic. So you see what they're doing there. Because one of the criticisms been that they hold up ambulances and stop people getting to medical appointments. My response to that, if they really are what they say they are, if she really is a nurse and he really is a paramedic, they should be struck off. They should lose their jobs, because what the hell are they doing? It's one thing going out and strike for better pay, which I generally support, but join eco zealots when you're in a profession that's meant to be saving lives and you're joining eco zealots who are deliberately messing with people's lives, causing immense stress, potentially holding up emergency appointments, you're a disgrace to your profession. And don't think that wearing nurse over your little activist thing is going to make the public feel sympathetic to you. I think the public will just say, okay, you're just another member of the cult. I've seen clergy among them. I've seen doctors. Again, there's nothing very Christian about deliberately. That's not a Christian principle. To deliberately hurt your fellow man in that way. Doctors, people who dedicate their lives to saving lives, are now what too much time on their hands. Gluing themselves to roads. I think the professionals among them should be blacklisted from their professions. I really do. I think the police need to stop making excuses. I think, the police approach to this has been nothing but pathetic, utterly pathetic. And I don't really accept that they're saying their hands are tied, they have to work within the framework. I think there's just a lack of willpower, to be quite honest, because they're not consistent. If they can hold a woman for 13 hours when she's done nothing wrong, when she's got no connection to Just Stop Oil, when she has nothing on her, if they can hold her for 13 hours, they can sure as hell take action against known activists. And more arrests have been made, but there's another thing I'll just close with for now. When people denounce a public order bill, I mean, I'm thinking of Greenpeace. Greenpeace has got into this big advertising campaign on social media saying that the government's taken away that right to peaceful protest. That's a misconception. I've looked at what the public order bill entails. I made a video specifically about this, and it was specifically designed, for example, to take away apparatus that could lock on. That is when activists lock themselves to buildings and so on, to make it difficult physically for the police to remove them. Now, it makes total practical sense to outlaw that. I mean, when we have new legislation, of course, it has to be closely scrutinised, and I would never be complacent about, the right to peaceful protest being taken away. That must be protected. And I accept that the argument that all protest is going to cause some degree of disruption. I maintain that there is a difference between protesting on a specific issue with the intention of pressuring the government and with the intention of, let's say, for example, protesters went outside the Chinese embassy, or even if environmental protesters went outside the likes of Shell. That's specific. But the difference here is Just Stop Oil have declared war on the public in a way that other protest groups don't. That's a difference with them, fundamental difference. Um, this is why the public order bill was brought in. It's very democratic. This is the point. This is the whole issue of democracy. It was brought in because the public demanded action. I think the question would be if the government done nothing and just let these extremists do what they want. Um, the likes of James O'Brien and others, their apologists, seem to genuinely think that because they call themselves protesters, they can basically do anything they want short of violence. But this absence of violence, the fact they're not throwing punches or planting bombs yet, to my mind, that doesn't make them peaceful. I would say that deliberately seeking to cause mental anguish, stress, mess with people's lives, I would say that's an aggressive, belligerent act. Um, and quite honestly, I hate them. I'll be quite honest about that. I've grown to just have contempt for them because I think that they are threatening our democracy. Um, and my anger comes not so much from personal experience. I haven't been personally affected by them, but it's what I call empathetic anger. I have enormous sympathy for the people that they're messing with. Ordinary people just trying to get to their jobs, um, doing all sorts of things. Maybe they're trying to see loved ones. Maybe they're trying to get to an airport. Maybe their relative has been away for months or years and they're trying to get to see them and they're being held up. It could be a whole lot of things that they're disrupting, and that really, really sickens me. Um, so I'm candid about that. I just have contempt for them. And I have to be honest, if I was a motorist and I was held up for, I mean, I wouldn't do anything reckless, but if I was held up in some emergency situation, if I was trying to get a sick relative to hospital, I can't guarantee that I wouldn't lose my rag and lay into them. Honestly, and people who do that shouldn't be, vilified as angry, bad people. I mean, Just Stop Oil actually had the arrogance to say, "Oh, we ask the public to stop lashing out at us." I mean, are they high? Are they actually high? they're deliberately hurting the public and they don't expect a response? Are they insane? Um, and no, just stop oil. People are not talking about the issues, they're talking about your tactics. That's what most of the discussion has been about. I don't know. I would just like to see, I'd like to see them made bankrupt. I'd like to see them mercilessly fined. Actually think arresting them and putting them in prison, although certainly some of them deserve that. I think they almost want that. They almost want this bizarre that they see themselves as political martyrs. I think actually fines might be better because it's harder to frame heavy financial penalties as political persecution, which isn't the case, by the way. But if they're sent to jail, which a lot of them deserve, they think they can call themselves political prisoners. Um, I would say this: I'm a passionate believer in human rights, but I would say if groups like Amnesty International and so on want to, you know, talk about this sort of stuff, I would say to them, what about the human rights of the majority to live their lives in peace? What about the human rights for people to make a livelihood? You know, this argument that a minority have more rights than the majority is utterly perverse, and I call it a tyranny of the minority. That's what it is. It's a tyranny of the minority. They're tyrants. They're extremists, and you can't reason with them. I don't think you can sit down and say, "Look, I understand where you're coming from, but I disagree with your tactics." That is a waste of time. They will not listen. So since they will not listen, the only option left is that we support the government in taking a much harder line against them. If the public, excuse me, if the government said we're going to outlaw all protest, then that would be, outrageous. If any legislation proposed stipulated that all protests would be outlawed, that would be outrageous. But this is not what is happening. The public order bill was brought in because the public demanded action. That's a reality. And it's something that Greenpeace, I've no respect for Greenpeace, but they're a powerful lobby, and that's what they're saying, and it's false. They're spreading false information. I'll leave it there. I don't expect to get through to eco zealots. I think, I guess the only ones that may have hope is some of the young members because young people can be impressionable. I was myself. I'm not saying that to be condescending. I was myself. When you have less life experience, you're more impressionable. It's just a reality. Doesn't mean you're stupid, but you're more impressionable because you want to make a mark for yourself. And um, if any of them have watched this, I know they won't have, but if any of them have watched this, I urge you, I implore you, don't ruin your life. Don't notch up a criminal record. Don't infuriate and hurt the public. Go and live your life. If you care so much about the planet, fine. Start up a green business. Support green businesses. Volunteer to go and help in the Amazon. Do something like that. But vandalizing paintings in London is not a legitimate approach. It just isn't.